For years, I've been wondering what Star Citizen would really feel like in VR. You've had that dream too, right? Where you're not just staring at a monitor, but you're in the cockpit, feeling the sheer scale of space all around you. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not a dream anymore, and it's kind of unreal how well it already works. This isn't some gimmick or a slick tech demo. This is me, right now, sitting in my own ship, looking at virtual instruments and finally feeling the true scale of everything. Star Citizen's native OpenXR support is still experimental in patch 4.5. But what I've found is that it's already shockingly impressive. This is Star Citizen in VR, as it is today. Practical look at what's truly possible. Now keep in mind, VR is notoriously hard to communicate through a video. You can watch footage, you can hear specs, but it never quite captures what it feels like when your brain clicks and you suddenly feel inside of the ship. I'll break it down as clearly as I can, but just know that this experience is always better in person than it looks on YouTube. So let's be clear, this isn't a generic headset review. I'm putting the Pimax Crystal Super, specifically with the optional 57 pixel per degree PPD lens, through its paces from the perspective of a longtime Star Citizen backer. If you're a sim pilot, a hardcore space gamer, or just someone who obsesses over cockpit clarity and spotting targets from a distance, you're in the right place. If you're here for the casual VR or rhythm games, this probably isn't for you. My goal is to be brutally honest about what works, what doesn't, and what problems are on CIG to fix versus what's a headset issue. This is about what it feels like to live in the verse through a pair of VR lenses. Forget the raw specs for a second and let me tell you why 57 ppd actually matters in the cockpit. This is the kind of clarity Pimax has been chasing for years with their flagship headsets, and the Crystal Super nails it. That level of pixel density isn't just a number for a marketing slide. For a game like Star Citizen, it's a game changer. It's the difference between reading your MFDs, button labels, and distant ship names, and leaning in so far that you feel like you're trying to read the fine print on a blurry monitor. In VR, the Crystal Super puts that information right in front of your eyes using dual 4K micro-QLED panels at 3840 by 3840 resolution per eye. So that clarity really does feel like a high-end resolution desktop monitor. That's the benefit of Pimax using high-end panels and glass lenses instead of opting for Fresnel optics. This completely changes how you play. Your situational awareness is just better. Spotting a distant pirate becomes a test of skill, not a pixel hunting nightmare. It also massively cuts down on the eye strain from trying to focus on fuzzy text. For Star Citizen, this setup prioritizes this insane clarity over a wider field of view. It's a trade-off for sure, but one that I think perfectly serves the demands of intense dogfights, complex cockpit management, and even tense FPS boarding actions. And before we go any further, it's worth taking a moment to explain how I was able to test this setup in the first place. Pimax and I are working together on this video, and they provided the Crystal Super so I could put it through its paces, specifically in Star Citizen, and share my honest experience. Nothing you're hearing here is scripted, approved, or filtered. The setup issues, the performance wins, and the things that still need work are all based on real time in the headset and real time in the game. With that context out of the way, let's talk about what this actually feels like once you're inside the cockpit. First time you boot up and find yourself sitting in a cockpit that's finally at a true one-to-one scale, it just hits different. It's transformative. The pilot's seat feels like you're sitting there. The control panels are exactly where you'd reach for them. You look down and the textures throughout the cockpit, the tiny screws, the scuffs of worn paint, it all just clicks. Flying through a planet's atmosphere, you feel the height and speed in a way a flat screen can't even touch, because your brain is getting all the depth cues it's used to in the real world. In a dogfight, the distance to your target and your closing speed feels tangible, not like abstract numbers on a HUD. This is the first time Star Citizen has felt like it was always meant to be played this way. It feels like the fulfillment of that promise CIG made over a decade ago when VR was first mentioned as a goal. Now let's get one thing straight. VR doesn't care about your peak frame rate. It demands a stable one. Consistency is king. My test rig is a beast. An AMD 9800 X3D paired with an RTX 5080 and 64 gigs of DDR5. But even with a setup like this, you have to be smart. With motion smoothing enabled, I found that maintaining a stable 60 plus frames per second in space is both achievable and feels great with FSR or DLSS. Motion smoothing is your friend here. It helps iron out the wrinkles, especially in heavy combat, making everything feel much smoother than the raw FPS counter might suggest. If your performance is choppy, VR will feel awful, no matter how good the headset is. Once things were configured correctly, the headset itself was never the bottleneck, and that says a lot about how much headroom Pimax built into this thing. Okay, so story time, because getting this to work was a bit of a journey. I got everything plugged in, buzzing with excitement, and my PC just kept crashing during setup. Unusable frame rates and constant shutdowns. For a minute, I thought the headset was the problem, but it turned out that the pain was all in the configuration. There are a couple things you absolutely have to do. First, in order for VR to even work right now, you need a user.cfg file in your game's installation folder. Inside that file, you need the line sys.openxr space = 42. Without this, the game just won't see your headset. The second critical step, at least for me, and perhaps other Pimax users, was in the Steam VR settings. You have to find the OpenXR runtime option and manually set it to Steam OpenXR instead of the default Pimax OpenXR. That one change solved the vast majority of my stability issues. My advice? Start with Pimax's quality settings on auto and stick to the standard resolution. Don't go crazy tuning everything until you have a stable baseline. The setup has some friction, but once it was dialed in, it ran with surprising consistency. So what does that actually mean when you're playing? In a dogfight, you're strapped in, frantically scanning the black for bandits. With the 57 PPD clarity, you can actually spot the details of their ship from much further away. Target acquisition is less guesswork and more pure visual confirmation. You look, you see, and you shoot. The distance feels real, which is everything when closing speed is the difference between getting a missile lock and eating one yourself. For general flying, quantum travel, and atmospheric entry just feel grand. Looking out the window at the curve of a planet below is a profoundly different experience than watching a skybox on a monitor. Judging your approach, an altitude feels more instinctive. And on foot during FPS action or quiet EVA, that clarity is still a huge advantage. Text on consoles is crisp. Item descriptions are clear. You can actually use your iron sights effectively. You're still using a mouse and keyboard or HOTAS, but having a free look camera on your head adds a whole new tactical layer to every encounter. Many of you have probably used Tobii Eye Tracker or TrackIR, and you know exactly what that feels like. Now, I have to be blunt. The UI is not perfect. It's an experimental feature from CIG, and it shows. Targeting elements on the HUD often feel like they're glued to your face, slightly inhibiting your view at the worst possible moments. The UI scaling needs more robust options, and I prefer to disable the MFD HUD cast that projects instrument readings into your helmet because of how cluttered it feels. These are CIG's implementation issues, not Pimax's hardware failures. They're annoying, yes, but not deal breakers, and CIG will likely refine them as VR support matures. If you appreciate no-nonsense deep dives like this, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps a ton. And if you want to support this work directly, you can join the Vanguard. Members get shoutouts, access to members-only channels in my Discord, behind-the-scenes content, and early access to members-only videos. There's no pressure at all. It's just there if you want to support more hands-on content. One of my biggest worries was comfort, but it's been surprisingly good. I've pulled off multiple 30 to 60-minute sessions with zero nausea, eye strain, or neck fatigue. For what it is, the headset is extremely comfortable, though I'll need more time for true multi-hour marathons. Small counterweight on the back would probably help for those really long hauls. Overall, the Crystal Super is already solid for extended cockpit time. You can tell this was designed for seated sim use first, not short room scale sessions. So to recap, if you're taking the VR plunge, here's what you should do. Set Steam VR as your OpenXR runtime. For me, this was a required step in order for it to work with Star Citizen. Create that user config file with sys.openxr space 42 to make sure that the game's VR mode is enabled. Start with default settings. Use Pimax's auto quality and don't start tweaking until you know it's stable. Use motion smoothing. It's your best friend for a consistent experience, especially when the action heats up. If you're getting crashes, double check your OpenXR runtime and Steam VR resolution settings. Don't push super sampling until you have a solid baseline. Let's be real, this is not an impulse buy. It's a pricey, specialized piece of kit for people who demand clarity above all else. If you're the kind of player who wants the absolute sharpest MFDs and no screen door effect, this is as close as you can get to looking at a high-end monitor in VR. It's for diehard simmers, dedicated space jockeys, and anyone who spends hours managing complex systems and tracking tiny, distant targets. If you're looking to play casual room-scale games, there are cheaper and more practical options out there. The setup friction is real, so be ready to spend some time troubleshooting. Star Citizen's own VR interface still needs a lot of love from CIG. And finally, this specific 57 ppd lens makes a deliberate trade. It sacrifices some peripheral field of view for that unbelievable central clarity. You lose a bit of wide-angle awareness, but you gain a functional, readable cockpit that clearly changes how you play. For serious sim pilots, these are trade-offs I'd make any day. For Star Citizen, right now, I'm giving the Pimax Crystal Super a 9.5 out of 10. Pimax clearly built the Crystal Super for people exactly like us. Sim players who care more about clarity and realism than anything else. The good stuff is just overwhelming. Clarity that makes the MFDs and targets perfectly readable, fantastic color and contrast from the QLED panels, a comfortable fit, and an unmatched feeling of being there. The only real downsides are the initial setup hassle and the UI quirks that CIG still needs to sort out. This headset is so good, it might just become your default way to fly. If you've been on the fence about VR for Star Citizen, waiting for the tech to catch up to the dream, this is the moment. If you do decide to check it out, the links in the description are affiliate links, which means I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. But what do you think? Have you tried VR in Star Citizen yet? Or are you waiting for it to mature a bit more? And if you have tried it, what's your biggest win so far? And what's the one thing that you want CIG to fix first? Also, if you want to see how Alpha 4.5 is changing ship survival, go watch my engineering deep dive next. I break down the resource network, relays, fuses, firefighting, and how solo and multi-crew ships can actually limp home instead of dying. As always, thanks for watching. Fly safe, pilots, and I'll see you in the verse. Havoc out.